What's up, Worship Drummer fam? I'm John Manna. This is the Worship Drummer podcast, and we're in for a treat in this episode because we've got Tim Womble coming your way. Well, we don't have to ride out that music for too long. Tim, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Worship Drummer podcast.
Man, I'm honored. This is so cool. I've been listening for a long time, so it's weird to be on it. I love it.
For sure. And I was just reflecting before we started, and I might be wrong. I didn't fact check myself, but you might be the first. I mean, you might play drums, but I know you play guitar. So you might be the first non-drummer on the Worship Drummer podcast. How crazy is that?
The Worship Non-Drummer podcast. No, it's funny. My first instrument was actually drums.
No way.
It was. If you saw me play now, you would not believe that at all. But I did drumline in middle school, and I think the only thing I kept skill wise was maybe the rhythm. But you wouldn't know now. But I'm honored. The first non-drummer on the Worship Drummer podcast. Where am I? What am I doing?
Yeah, man.
I love it.
Well, for those of you who might not know or be familiar with Tim, I'll start by saying 2021 maybe we connected, and I needed the website redone, and I don't remember who it was that connected us on Instagram, but Tim redid the website. It's been a number of years now, but that was like our introduction together. And why don't you just take some time, as much as you need, to explain to all of us who you are. You're obviously, I don't know if I said it yet, but Tim's at Elevation, and he's done a few things there on staff, and most of you would likely know not him, but the work he does through Elevation Worship Resources. So that's kind of like the today moment, but rewind for us and just let us know, hey man, who are you? What has your experience been? How did you get connected with Elevation? Because I know it's been over a decade for sure, I would imagine.
Wow, man. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's always funny thinking back on this stuff, because it's like, it feels like 2 years ago in a lot of ways, and 25 in a lot of other ways. But no, I've been at Elevation Church since 2011. And I got plugged in through, I was on our college campus. I went to school in North Carolina, and a friend, we had this thing at the time called Extension, and they invited me to be a part of this team. Essentially what we were doing was they would have Saturday church at the time, and they would give a bunch of these, college location extension sites, the Saturday sermon and the set list, and say, show church. And it was special because at the time we weren't doing a lot of online ministry in the way we are now. And so it's funny to look back and be like, wow, that was kind of paving the way for what became our model that we're doing. But all we knew that we were doing was, an hour north of Charlotte, they were sending us the sermon, and we would invite all of, our friends from college to come to the campus movie theater. And I was the worship leader, the production director, which just meant I set up the Pro Tools computer, the graphic designer, and it was so fun. It felt so scrappy, and like nobody came if we didn't invite them. There was no Google listing or anything. People to find it, the way they found it was if we invited them and they came, and it was so special. But eventually started feeling a tug towards Charlotte, and I would have been a sophomore at the time. And so in 2012 I auditioned to play guitar. And what's funny is, like, I was a decent guitar player, but I wanted to be an intern. And I thought, well, if I can just, help them put a face to the name, I won't make the band, but maybe I'll get the internship. And I don't think I ever got considered for the internship, but I got a call back for the band. Nice. And auditioned a couple more times. And since 2012, I've just been serving on the weekends and whatnot. And fast forward a few years later, I did a few other things. Like, it might have been 2018 that we met. I think it was that long ago. We've been friends for quite a while. Yeah. But around that time, I started feeling this, tug towards maybe I want apply and work at the church, but didn't really know what I wanted to do because my background outside music is, always just been a fun thing I get to serve and do, but never been like a focus of mine to build, a career around. And so graphic design, all that kind of stuff like that. That was my focus at the moment. And in 2018, I started feeling like there was this tug from the Lord to just put an application and see what happens. And a friend goes, "Do you know how to code?" And I was like, "No, I don't know how to code. I barely speak English." But he goes, "Well, if you learn, we have an open email marketing job available." And so the long story short of it is I taught myself on YouTube how to code, and after I got the job, which they knew, I was like, "I don't know how to do this at all. Hope you're cool with that." They said, "Well, as long as you're able to learn." And I taught myself on YouTube, and we started. I started realizing very quickly that I loved helping with the marketing around all of our elevation worship projects. And so, fast forward a few years later, and the opportunity came along to step into this new role that we were creating around. It's called song marketing. Yeah. How do we get the songs that are coming out of our church into the resources into the hands of people that are wanting to lead them? And so we hadn't really been doing anything at the time. We had started our YouTube channel, and we can talk more about that in a second, but it was a brand new thing and kind of uncharted waters for us. And they invited me to step into this role. And ever since, it'll be 2 years in the fall that we've just been kind of trying to figure out what that looks like. And I've been having the time of my life, but that's the short story long version of how I arrived in that position. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And it's only been 2 years since Elevation Worship Resources launched. That's wild.
Well, since I've been in the role, yeah.
That's true, yeah. We can dive into that a little bit because I know the people that watch Worship Drummer content on our YouTube channel, oftentimes they're jumping between videos from the resources channel to ours. And talk a bit about the why. Obviously song marketing sounds very businessy.
Yeah,
but for Elevation Worship Resources, what was the intent of, is it just strictly to push songs, or to resource the church? And what's the big why behind it, and the so that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's cool, man. There's one of the things I love most about our team is there is such a consistent thread from Chris to everybody down that, at the end of the day, we just love the church. We love resourcing the church. We love our church. We love all churches. And so there's always just been such a focus on first and foremost, how can we help our teams with 20 locations be on the same page? And so we've been doing a lot of this stuff for years internally.
Yeah.
But it's always been special as new songs come out, trying to figure out, one, like I said, how do we get them into the hands of our own teams? But as God's given us more of a platform to share our songs around the world, what does it look like to be able to help churches who, maybe there's a church in Malaysia who wants to sing one of our songs, which is still wild. It blows my mind every time. But what does it look like to, dedicate resources and time to helping people who, at the end of the day, I always say, if somebody wants to learn one of our songs, I want to make it such an easy on-ramp to find what they need to do it. And we've got amazing partners and, in other groups that are helping us out, do all that. But a lot of the why that we're doing this is so that we can help churches who, maybe, their pastor's preaching in a sermon series and it correlates directly with a song of ours. Most churches are not large churches,
Right.
They're small churches, and they don't have, a lot of people don't have music directors who have degrees and knowledge for days. And it's, people who are trying to figure it out when they're not at their banking job or whatever. And maybe they don't even have a drummer. And so, what does it look like for us to create the quickest way that they can, get the chord charts, get the lyrics, and take them to their team? And so, obviously video is a great tool for that. And we've just been having discussions all the time about the why we do this is to help churches.
Yeah.
So how can we do that the most efficient way possible. And yeah, it's been a journey to figure that out. But we're trying, new stuff all the time. But that it always comes back to the heart of that's why we're doing this. It's not to get our reach further for the sake of more people knowing about elevation worship. It's so that when someone hears a song and it ministers to them, that they can even if it's not even a church, if it's someone with an acoustic guitar in a dorm room. Like that's my
Right.
story. I learned how to play just finding songs, back in the day. And back in the day when I was learning how to play guitar, it wasn't easy to find stuff. So I think that's a lot of the person in my why. Like, well, let me just make what wasn't available when I was a kid.
Right. Wow. So coming into the role, and I know we're talking about what you do, with Elevation Worship Resources. I also want to get in a second to just like, what are you passionate about?
Totally.
I know I asked you about gear, so we'll get
Oh
to
yeah.
that a little later, but also maybe some things that you're learning. We'll come to those questions, but
Cool.
let's stick on the resources stuff for a bit. Um, who's your favorite drummer? I know I didn't put this in the questions.
Oh gosh.
And
Favorite
it's not
drummer.
to say one is better than the other, but maybe some are easier to work with. Again, not because of their character, but maybe there's
Sure.
something about how they play or approach that just makes them easy to work with or to capture. Maybe it's
Hmm.
something unique you've noticed about a drummer, and you're like, this is like, I know Dom has all the different sounds.
Sure.
Vincent is like a straight standard setup. I don't know, just curious to pick
Yeah.
your brain because you have to capture some of what
Right.
they do,
Right.
and I'm not asking you to pick, just for the record, guys. One drummer over another. Maybe I didn't phrase the original question right, but it was just like, what are some unique things about Vincent,
Sure.
Otis, or maybe even Dom, Luke that
Well, yeah.
we might not perceive?
Let's go through all of them. Let's do that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's favorite's such a funny word because there's favorite things about everybody. Um, as you're talking though, that it is interesting because when we're setting up cameras to capture these songs and capture the drummers playing them, I'm not really thinking about like, oh, this guy brings that to the table. But a lot of the special moments that I've had are things that would be maybe a little bit odd to share, from our channel. But like, for example, when I grab footage of Dom, and we always take, the audio, and I kind of scrap the GoPro audio. It's really just there for syncing up stuff. But
yeah,
it's always so special because there have been so many times that you can just hear Dom singing and worshiping. And like I said, it'd be kind of odd to share that. It's more of a
right.
personal thing with him and the Lord. But we just captured, the resources for our new project coming out soon. And the whole time we had Dom in an isolation booth, you can just hear him singing. And I love that so much. And that's so characteristic of him. The energy, it's just fun. And so I know that anytime we have like an aux drum cam from one of our songs, I'm like, he's probably going to be just bouncing and singing. And I love that. Funny story about Vincent. We, when we did the Can You Imagine resource shoot, we had the camera and initially I told the guys, I was like, we have 8 songs to get through. I don't think we're going to have time for multiple takes. What was crazy is Chris was out of town, so I played acoustic in that and directed it. And it was the most stressful thing. I loved it, but it was very stressful. And so the whole time I'm thinking like, I cannot be the one to tell these guys, hey, sorry, I messed up. Can we redo that song after they get a perfect take? So I
Right.
was just in my head the whole time. But I told the guys, I was like, hey, we can't do multiple takes. We can't go, let's take Vincent's take 1, Joey's take 2, whatever. And so eventually we did, we did a few takes of a couple of them, like, hey, let's all hit that again. I take all the footage, I go into post, and I was working with one of our editors, and we finished a video, got it back, and I talked to Will, who's one of our studio guys. He's an amazing drummer as well. And he goes, yeah, sounds awesome. And then he texts me a few hours later. He goes, hey, man, I think the audio is wrong for that take. I was like, on what take? He's like, on Vincent's. Sure enough, in a 7-minute song, he did one push differently and everything else lined up identically.
Wow.
The entire song. He is the most consistent drummer I think I've ever worked with, to where, like I said, in a 7-minute song, I think we just for fun, we took the audio and like 3 takes lined up perfectly to the point where, honestly, I'm not even sure. Some of those videos up there right now might be with the wrong take, but we all wouldn't know. So that's amazing. And then Otis is just so creative. It blows my mind how he'll, and I think about this all the time, where if I'm in his shoes, I'm like, that is such a risky fill. If it's me, he doesn't think like that, I'm sure, but I'm just like, if I went for that and didn't quite get it, everyone would know. But Otis is constantly changing things up and trying things, and I'll ask him, I'm like, hey, can we do like a fill breakdown? He's like, I'd have to go relearn what I did. I was just flowing in the moment and trying things.
Wow.
And so Otis just has this really unique, amazing way of, when I hear something Otis plays on, I know it's Otis.
Yeah.
He's got such a unique voice on the drums, and it's special, especially when, you know, I think a lot of people might hear the faster stuff and go, oh, like he went off on that. But the way he can drop back and play simply and then flip a switch and go into the stuff that, you know, that a lot of people know him for, it just shows me his technique and his control is off the chart. So they're all different, but from a resources standpoint, I think it's just so fun getting to sit with, you know, the stems and listen to what these guys are doing. And yeah, I feel like I know their drumming as well as maybe anybody at this point.
Yeah, no, that's so sweet. You know, as you've been doing this stuff with Elevation, most recently, I think of like Red Rocks Worship. They launched like their resources stuff. And if you guys haven't checked it out, you should. Matt McKenzie,
so good.
Shout out. Great drummer. And like, what is your encouragement to not just drummers now, and drummers, if you're watching this, you might want to forward this part to your worship leader or your worship pastor, but what encouragement do you have now that you guys have done it? We're seeing some other ministries, you know, step out and do a similar thing. What's your encouragement to churches and worship departments that are doing, like, they have their own albums, but maybe they haven't thought about resourcing the churches at large with this kind of stuff? So
true. You mentioned Red Rocks. I love those guys. They're the kindest people, and Matt is one of the best drummers.
Yeah.
Oh man, I could talk as much about Matt. I listen to so much of their music. I love it. Yeah, Matt and John hit me up. Just they're like asking questions. I'm like, we're still winging it too, man. We're still figuring it out. Like, tell me what y'all are doing. But we just traded, you know, ideas and whatnot. And they first started, you know, talking about what it would look like for Red Rocks to do it. I was so excited because I was like, man, like I know our context. I don't really know a lot of other contexts.
Right.
And so it's really cool to see what makes their church and their culture unique. Beyond the drumming, beyond the songs, they do so many cool videos about like what it looks like to flow with their music director and whatnot. And it's not that there's one way that's wrong or right or better or worse. I think I would encourage anybody who's looking to make resources for their church just to think, what makes us unique and different? And you might not even know it's unique and different until you start sharing things. That's what happened with us, is like little things like everyone's constantly asking, where's your click track from? Can I have it? And it's just a Reason sample from like 2006 that we detuned a little bit. So that's why we can't share it, because it's not ours.
Yeah.
But we didn't realize that was a special, unique thing that people thought about with us. We're just like, that's just the click we use. So as you're sharing things, I think I would encourage anyone who's looking to make resources for their churches. One, you probably are grossly underestimating the impact you have and not really realizing that people are paying attention. So don't say no, oh, they wouldn't listen to that, or no one would care for them. Let them show you that, hey, maybe this stuff you're thinking is important to some people.
Right.
But secondly, just start somewhere. Just, you know, it's like anything. It's not just on this topic. It's like anything. If you're constantly waiting to start until you feel like you have it together or you feel like it's perfect, you'll probably never start.
Yeah.
And I fall into the trap all the time of, oh, if I do this once, I have to do it forever. Who says? You know, if a video goes well, maybe do another one, but, you know, just think, what makes us unique? What story can we tell? And in a day and age, there's so many, like, I was asking a friend the other day, I was like, I feel like I'm not, like, back in the day, there just wasn't a lot. And now there's so much. Is there even a place for certain things in certain conversations? And it's
Right.
like, there's always a place. Cause like, yes, the world may have seen 30 people talk about the same thing, but they haven't heard you talk about it yet.
Right. Yeah.
And I have to constantly, go back to the idea that not everyone knows everything that I think is common, and so I think summing this thought up, I would just tell anybody, like, just start somewhere, just try stuff, and hold your plans loosely, and just, like, half of the fun stuff that we get to do is just reacting, which is tough if you're, like, in a project management, calendar.
Right.
But if you build time into it where you can go, hey, a lot of people are asking for this, can we accommodate that? Can we try it? But you have to just start somewhere. And so, yeah, just don't underestimate the influence you have, and just see what sticks with people.
I love it. And just to add to that too, Worship Drummer, this channel right here, I remember I was like, oh, YouTube, I should, like, put Worship Drummer and just hold it for now. And I remember going to see Calvin Rogers play, and he's a gospel drummer for Fred Hammond, and they were here, so we connected. We had
So good.
dinner before the night started, and Tim, all I had was my iPhone 7,
Yeah.
and I was, like, literally
all you need.
sitting behind him for 3 hours the whole night, and I was like, Lord, please don't let my phone die. And
Been there.
I posted one video, and to this day, it's about to hit 1 million views, which I don't
Wow.
have another one that's as close as that. But it was with my iPhone 7, and so then when I saw this thing had like 30,000 views, and this is like 2018-ish, maybe earlier, 2017. I was like, wait a minute. Here I was, just like, I didn't know what to do with the video.
Yeah.
And it was the unique perspective of who gets to sit behind Calvin Rogers for 3 hours
No one.
and capture stuff from a drummer's perspective that, cares about drums. So
Right.
I share that to say YouTube is free. I had the
100%.
iPhone already. And then I like, the audio was just iPhone 7 audio. And so if, we'll link it below in this video just for you to check out if you've never seen it. But, if someone's thinking, well, we don't have resources like Elevation to buy cameras, like, what's your answer to that?
Oh man.
Your
I'm so glad you
pushback?
said that. It's so funny.
And not the gear rundown, because I
We'll get
want to
there.
know what you guys
We'll get
use,
there.
because the quality is out of this world.
Thank
But
you.
to combat the
Dude,
idea that we need a big budget.
it's so funny. Yeah, we've got a large creative team. We have a creative team dedicated solely to elevation worship, which is great. But they don't really have the time to get involved with what we're doing with elevation worship resources. So for all intents and purposes, the team, quote unquote, up until now has been me. And
Wow.
like it's tough when you have so many examples of, like, oh, I want it to look this way. It's tough for me at least to kind of go, and I'm cool if it's not like great. I'm like, no, I want to figure this out. I want to get it like as good as we can.
Right.
And we have, like I said, a large creative team, but they're all focused on their own things. And so in the early days, it was tough because I was like, okay, the only gear that we had dedicated to EW resources were, I think, a GoPro 9 and 2 8s. That our production director, Jared, just kept at Ballantine for when they said, hey, let's throw a GoPro on for this song. And so they're like,
Yeah.
here's what we've got. And so for a few months, that's what we had to make work. And it was working within that constraint. Like I said, I've been in the role for 2 years. We just got a camera kit dedicated to resources a month ago.
Wow.
So for the first 2 years or so, it was a lot of equity building. The amount of times I begged my friends, interns, to borrow their personal cameras all the time. Hey, can I use your camera for like 2 hours at this point? Are you using it? Okay, cool. Thanks, man. Like, can you, hey, do you remember to bring it? Like, stuff like that. And, like, in a world where, especially with drummers and guitar players and, man, God forbid, cameras, it's a whole different,
Oh yeah.
ballpark. We're always wondering, like, oh, I need the best. I need to know what the best is. I need to have the best. And I'm that way too. And it taught me you can do so much being creative. So a lot of the early stuff, we eventually, when we did the This Is the Gospel Elevation Rhythm live recording, we bought a few more Hero 11 GoPros. And we have 4 total Hero 11s, the 2 9s and 8. And that's our GoPro setup. And so we got them for that live recording, and then that's what I used for, up until now. And still use those, but as far as GoPros are concerned. And so I learned very quickly, like the colors, they don't have like, again, without getting too technical, they don't have log, which is the quote unquote raw, not really raw,
Right.
but the ability to change a lot. It's just, here's what it is. And so I went and talked to, some of the guys who do color for us. I said, help me build a preset, a LUT I can drop on this to make it look better. And then spent a long time on YouTube just teaching myself how to color grade, to fix what was quote unquote wrong and optimize what was, better or worse. And it's like anything you spend time with, you eventually get a little bit better with it. But it's been really fun just to have these limitations on what we're doing, because you have to innovate, you have to figure it out. And so a lot of people maybe are looking at what we're doing with this stuff and thinking we're dropping tons of money, and it's like, we're not really dropping a lot of money. We bought a couple GoPros, but it's been a lot of just trial and error and figuring out what works. And in a place where maybe your church doesn't have a lot of money, or if you're not a part of a church, if you're just a drummer, like, use your phone. Like,
Yeah.
your iPhone is as capable as the best camera 10 years ago.
It's wild.
That's crazy. So if you use what's in your hand already, you'll probably be pretty surprised. And I always tell people, early on when I was learning guitar, I had a mentor friend tell me, hey, don't sell a pedal until you've read the manual and you know what it can do. Because there were so many times I would sell a pedal and be like, my DD5 could do that. It could do reverse. Oh, come on. I'm over here with this new $400 delay pedal. So that, I think that mindset with cameras, it's like, oh, like, well, if you don't even know why the pro cameras cost what they do, like, don't go buy one. Figure out what your phone can do.
That's great advice. You said something, and it's the second time in this chat that really stood out to me. Number one, you learned HTML on your own. You went to YouTube and figured it out. And now you just said the same thing for color grading. So within you, what is it? Because I think there are a lot of people that need to learn from what you just explained to us. It wasn't handed to you on a silver platter. You didn't have a degree, or a college education to teach you all this stuff. But as you're in the position, in the role, you're iterating and you're improving on your own. So what is it within you that has that motivation and drive to, like, hey, I want to figure this out? Where does that come from?
Man, that's a good question. I'd imagine it's like a lot of stuff where you don't really think about that. You just kind of do your thing. But I think as I was growing up, I just learned a lot of, like, there was a lot of value I found. I had mentors, like my high school small group leader. When I was 15, 16, a part of my local church. I remember being so bummed because I wasn't getting invited to like the parties, which thank you, Jesus. I wasn't invited to those parties. I didn't need to be there anyways. But I remember growing up, my small group leader would say things like, hey, you can either learn lessons the hard way or you can spend time with us. And I'll tell you the mistakes I made, and then you don't have to deal with the pain of it. You can just learn the lesson. And I just remember thinking that, like, that's just wisdom, Yeah. At the time I was like, that's cool. I don't want to deal with, stuff I don't want to have to go through if I don't have to. But I think what it taught me as I've, looking back and gotten older is there's so much value in just learning and staying curious, and maybe like the churchy word be like submitting yourself to an authority and saying, I don't know certain things. I have blind spots, but I'm willing to like have them addressed so I can get better. So backing up a little, I would just say like, if you're looking to grow, like there's never been a time in history where there's so much free knowledge.
Yeah, come on.
And back in the day, if you wanted to learn how to make a saddle, you had to find a leather, a saddlery guy who would let you apprentice, and you have to spend weeks and months. And now it's like there's saddle making YouTube. I guarantee it. I don't know. But
right.
If you want to learn something, there's never been a time it's easier. And if I think with the color grading thing, I was like, I know mine doesn't look like his.
Right.
So it was asking trusted friends, hey, what can I do to close the gap a little bit? And I think it's like anything with drumming, guitar, it's the same thing. Like, hey, Matt, Otis, Vinny, Dom, Luke, you guys have such good timing. My timing's not great. What can I do to get there, get better? And that's what lessons and all that stuff. But I remember hearing, a long time ago that like, as we're Christians, as we're striving to like grow in humility and become more like Jesus, humble people ask really good questions and delight in learning small facts about people. And I've just found there's so much value and joy in one, like if someone comes to me and says, I love what you do, will you teach me how to do it? It's the most encouraging thing. So it's such a life-giving thing to be able to go to someone who you respect for what they do and say, hey, I don't know how you do this, but will you teach me why you thought to do it that way?
Right.
And then if you have a notepad open and, I can't tell you how many times after we've, like I have 200 or 300 notes in my phone where I'll just get in the car after an amazing hang with a friend and just like word vomit everything I can remember. And now I'll search a word and like 7 notes will come up. I think maybe it comes from the way I was brought up, but I think a lot of it just really comes from the value that has been added to my life by just staying teachable and staying, like open to learn from anyone and anything.
I love it. That's so cool. And so, you did the time, you learned the skill. Is there ever a time where, and maybe it's like, I don't have extra time to dive in, where you would buy the preset or the LUT, or, instead of let me deep dive and learn a new skill? And how do you decide? Is it just based on budget and time or interest, maybe?
Sure. I do a ton of photography. That's like my passion outside of all this. And it's funny, like there's kind of two schools of thought. There's, people who are like, presets are just robbing you of the chance to learn. I reverse engineer them. I'm like, okay, what'd you do? Why'd you make that? Like, what is this? What's that doing? As much as I can, a lot of like photo presets and LUTs and drum samples and stuff. You're like, I don't know what mic they used, but I think a lot of it, like the way I learned guitar was show me what it's supposed to sound like. And I've always had the ability to go and I can kind of tell where mine isn't. Oh, his has a lot more low end than mine does. Oh, that snare is a lot, it sounds a lot more full than mine does. That kind of thing.
That's cool.
And so I don't look at them as a crutch. It's more of like a learning tool, and I'm not opposed to it. And as far as the cost, I think there's so much wisdom in not spending beyond your means. And so if you're looking, you're like, oh, I literally can't afford it, then I think it's a good chance to ask yourself, like, yeah, it would be a lot quicker to get there, but how close can I get? And there's a lot of wisdom. Someone told me as I was learning how to, dial in guitar tone, if you see something you like, tone wise or whatever, and you go for it, and not talking about presets, just trying to teach yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't quite get there, don't throw it away as a failure. Ask yourself, well, what is now in my toolbox that wasn't there a few days ago? And you might realize, well, it might not be what you were shooting for, but it still might be good.
Yeah.
And then go easy on yourself and give yourself grace, because as you do this thing more and more, you learn by doing. It's like anything. It's a process. You get better by doing the thing. I can't tell you how many times I play a lot of golf. Watching videos on how to do it will never be as good as going to the range.
Yeah, come on.
It's like anything. And so, you can buy presets and they're great. It's going back to the gear thing. Like if you're buying something and not knowing what they're changing, like learn what they're changing. What does that slider do? What is, the amount of times I open up DaVinci or Pro Tools and go, I don't even know what these submenus mean. I have no idea. And then someone, shows me 2 years after I've been doing it the hard way, you didn't know about that? It's like, no, how would I learn? Just ask a lot of questions and learn. But if it's a financial thing, like we have this phrase at our church, like think inside the box. Like what limitations do I have? And if I'm as creative within those limitations as I can be, you might get something, like I said, that you don't throw it away. Like this is cool. Like this is usable. But then keep pushing forward.
That's so cool, man. I like to change gears just a bit, and let's go to a live album recording, or maybe it's elevation nights, where there's content that you want to capture. And so maybe share with us or walk us through like the process, if you can, from start to finish, of what you're thinking as you're like, okay, this is the stage, this is the setup, where do the cameras go? Like give us a glimpse inside of that world in your head. And so just that process, and we see the final product, right? But I'm sure there are a lot of steps. And so to the best of your ability, on like, because this is also an audio podcast. So
totally,
for the listener to be able to envision. And then after that, I'll ask you to just share all the gear.
Cool.
That the nerdy tech stuff.
Let's do it.
So this way,
I love it.
Drummers don't want to hear it, they can tune off at that.
Come back in for the gear, because everyone loves gear. Man, it's so funny. I never think about this from like a start to finish standpoint, so I'm gonna try my best.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just kind of reacting. Now, I think to start off, there's a really big difference in my mind between like capturing for social media and capturing resources for the church. No, we have an amazing content creator. He's one of my close friends. His name's Seth, and Seth is on tour, and he's capturing a lot of wide shots of the room, and he's capturing a lot of like, he's still capturing like musicians and drums and stuff like that, but he's focused on just telling the story of the night.
Yeah.
Whereas my focus is a little different. It's, how can I resource, churches to play these songs? Let me back up and say though, we think in kind of two different buckets. We think in terms of whether it's a short or a video. There's videos that are really practical and someone can watch and immediately add something to, their craft that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
And then there are just entertaining videos, because we all love this thing we do week in and week out, and it's fun to watch. So there's a healthy balance between entertaining and fun. So thinking towards like an elevation nights or a live recording, we'll talk about both, but start with, elevation nights. We've done over 50 shows, and certain small things will change here and there. The set might differ a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, they're very similar nights from when they began till now. And so it was initially a little bit tricky, because anytime, I don't go on the bus. Like I'll typically go out to one or two shows and try just to get as much as I can within those one or two shows. So it was initially pretty tricky because I didn't know our set very well. I knew the songs, but I didn't know how they flowed from one to another, where to be, when not to be in certain places. For like a song like Rattle, if I'm over on, the side as Vinny's starting, the part of the song where he's highlighted in it, it's just the positioning thing is tough.
Yeah.
And as you do a few of them, you kind of start learning like, oh, those are the really cool moments. What's gotten trickier as we go on is going into a week or a night like that, I'm planning, okay, we've done 4 resurrecting cams now. And that song, large and like, it really hasn't changed that much, the arrangement we're doing. And so I don't want to like overdo it. So it's maybe thinking, is that a short of a different moment, a different angle we haven't shown? Is it a full length video? Is it a short? Is it this? Now we get asked all the time for like gear rundowns, right?
Yeah.
Like so take someone like Nick Edwards. His pedal board hasn't changed really in 2 years. And there are guys who switch out of stuff a lot more than other people do. And so, you know, doing like a 2024 pedal board update on Nick wouldn't really change all that much. But you know, guys like Otis and Vinny, maybe they're changing out cymbals, maybe they're doing something like that. It's just trying to like plan those moments. But then I'm setting up these GoPros. It's funny, like they're not up there like setting the framing with me. Like, all right, can you sit down, Vinny? All right, cool.
Right.
I'm just like, I think it'll be good. I hope it's good. I hope it stayed on all night. I hope it didn't die. And having done it a few times, it's always kind of fun. I'm like, yes, I nailed like E's head isn't cut off. Like, it's always fun. But it's some of the most fun moments for me are going back and post and going, wow, that was so cool to see. I didn't know that moment looked like that. So we'll, you know, kind of all over the place. But what I'm trying to get at is that I'll plan going into like, oh, I'm flying to Boston for Elevation Nights. I want to capture this rig rundown, this gear thing, and I'll put a GoPro on these 4 guys. And then I'll do another night, and I won't put a GoPro on them because I have one on there. Don't need 2 nights. But then there's always this really cool moment, not to like over spiritualize it, but just going like, and Lord, like, see what happens. Because sometimes cool moments do happen. And it's always fun. We did a LJ Rattle MD cam video a while ago. We floated into Rattle out of a sermon. It was not planned, and I luckily had the camera set up, and so then we, you know, took all the footage and said, well, what can we do with this? And it looks a lot like that for these nights as well. But a lot of it is just reacting and just seeing what happens in the moment and thinking, well, I haven't tried that before. Let's see what happens. Live recordings are a little different. It's so funny. We have a GoPro on everyone, but because of overdubs, we can't really use anything except drums.
Yeah.
It just doesn't line up. And, you know, they'll go back and like take a song like Praise. The guitar part hadn't even been written yet, the hook.
Wow.
So a month later they wrote that. So I couldn't put anything up. And so shout out Worship Drummer fam. Like, you guys make it easy because drums are what they are. And it also makes me wonder every time, there's no room for error for these guys. And it is amazing that they can push through. But I usually have a GoPro on all of them. And I think going into like an album release or something like that, it's always like, hey, what can we do with these live drum cams? And what can we do with this? You know, we do a shoot where we bring everyone into the studio. And we just did ours for our new project and just play through the record and try to tell them like, hey, play church arrangements. Not, you know, so we have the album arrangement with the live GoPro, and then we'll have what always gets a little bit simplified for church.
Yeah.
But then the last piece of this puzzle is audio, right? Because anyone who has ever put a GoPro by, you know, 4 cymbals knows that audio is not usable. Maybe like a snare hit is cool, but large and in part, you're like, this is a tough listen. It's just shrill. So on nights, I will always, if it's rhythm, I'll connect with Justin, who's rhythm's front of house engineer, and he'll give me the stems from the whole day. And then I'll get with Corey Edwards, and Corey will give me the breakouts from his console. And then it's not going in there and tweaking I don't ever tweak any sort of like tonal stuff. It's just levels. Yeah. And I'll usually do the drums at, you know, 0, and bring everything down to like -14 other than the drums. And do that for all the other instruments, right? But I'm not really like the goal with resources is, yes, we want it to sound good, but I want it to sound true. Yeah. Like, you know, like we don't want to change anything, especially not like, you know, these guys whose mixes just already sound amazing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the last piece of that would be weekends are a little different because we record raw audio. And so I can't just take it and we have to do something with it. So the church cams will have our studio team mix. But that's why like it's a pretty big process for the weekend GoPro cams. So it's a little easier with the tour stuff, but I think the most fun thing is just getting back like the album stems, and it's always so funny because everyone's like, whoever mixed this, and I'm like, that's not me. I can't take credit. I typed a few numbers and pushed a few faders, but it's kind of like LeBron James holding you up to dunk.
Right.
It's not my I didn't do anything, but it is fun. It is getting to solo stuff and do that. But hopefully that made sense. I felt it was a little all over the place, but it's always a process.
And so, is there any software? I mean, obviously you're editing video and stuff. So just maybe run us through. You have now all these files, audio and video.
Yeah.
What are you sitting at your desk working through? What softwares and apps?
Cool. No, so here's what's amazing. We use DaVinci Resolve, or I use DaVinci Resolve. Our team does as well, but the reason I love it is it's, in my opinion, one of the stronger color grading options. But it's linear, so you have your file import, you've got your edit, your cut. They have like a After Effects style thing called Fusion, but there's a full DAW right in this video editor that is incredible. It has all my plugins. It's got everything,
Wow.
and so I edit the video. Don't have to export anything. No Pro Tools, no Logic, and I'll just take it right in there and mix from there. Now sometimes if it's like a stem bounce or something we've gotten from a final product or a night of worship or tour or something like that, I will usually take it into Pro Tools or Logic and just, do it quick because it's faster in there. But any video that is not that, if it's like a gear rundown, I'm editing the audio right in DaVinci Resolve. And as far as plugins, we love the FabFilter stuff, Pro Q3, it's amazing. Sometimes we'll use, it's plugins, it's an endless conversation, but Clarity from Waves is great. De-reverb, denoise, the isotope stuff. But it's such what we're doing with the resources, because it's a small team. It's usually like me going, hey guys, can you come listen to this thing and fix it? Okay, thanks, perfect. We're not, striving for as good as we can, but knowing when to call it good enough is kind of the name of our game. But at least with resources stuff, everything else, like I can't speak for that. But it's not a expensive operation at all. It feels, I think I feel most at home when it's like, let's just try it, let's just see what happens. And you end up getting, like, oh, like you should try this plugin. Oh, that plugin's amazing. I'm gonna use it from now on. But it's not as expensive as people will probably assume.
That's so cool. Let's get onto gear. I know time's going. So I know you mentioned like the GoPros. You do other stuff like interviews. You can even talk about Discord after if you want.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us what's your go-to like camera lens setup.
Totally.
Maybe recommend one of your videos where we can like see the quality of that.
Yeah. Okay. So back up, do GoPros real quick. We have 4 Hero 11s. Didn't feel the need to upgrade. They're great. The Hero 12s look awesome, but just felt like it would be better to keep, to steward the finance as well and just keep using what we have. It's great.
Yeah.
4 Hero 11s, 2 9s, and an 8. We have an Insta360 X3 that is cool. They've used that for a few things. And then the Insta360, I think it's called the Go 3, the mini one. It's a little pill-shaped one.
That's cool.
For all like the perspective stuff where it's like from right here. Did a video with Otis with that, which was super cool. They're literally wearing it around their neck.
Wow.
And then as far as actual cameras, we just got them and they've been incredible. We bought a Sony FX3, which isn't a cheap camera, but the reason I love it is because it's amazing in low light. So if you're talking about like a dark stage on tour and still being able to get something from behind them, it's amazing. And then the little brother of that camera, we bought 2 of those. It's a Sony FX30. And we got 2 of those because there was no need to get 3 FX3s. That'd be quite excessive, but they match really well. So we have to do like these zoom hangs. We just put out one with David and Bella, and the middle camera is the FX3 because it's full frame,
Yeah.
can crop really well, and then the individual shots were just the FX30s. As far as lenses on those, we have a 16 to 35 Sony G Master 2, the version
Nice.
2, and then 16 to 35 Sony G Master version 1. They're both amazing. And then a 24 to 70 GM2. And that's it. That's all the gear we have for camera gear. I love the Peak Design tripods because they're small and they're great. And I'm a photographer and I didn't want to switch. But they're great. They fold down to the size of a water bottle, so you can throw them in a backpack. But as far any of the video content that that isn't like clearly a GoPro is shot on these Sonys, and that just came from the fact that that's what our social team was using. We have one FX3 that Seth uses for all of his social content for the Instagram, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be asking his opinion on how to color grade this thing, I might as well just get the camera he has.
Yeah.
So it looks the same. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't believe there is, as far as camera gear. And then just the cards we're using, just a bunch of, cheaper ones we found on Amazon that work great.
Nice.
Didn't need to drop a ton of money on the cards.
Yeah. And the clamps for the GoPros,
Yeah.
what clamps are you using?
Oh man, I love talking about these. I don't know the exact name. It's a brand called Small Rig. I'll send it to you and you can put it in the description.
Sure.
They're like $15, and it's a 1/4 inch input to like a clamp, and I bought like 10 of them because they're so cheap. We use them for everything. I use them for all the GoPros, and the reason I do that, we bought the little arms that they have, but at one of the live recordings, our video director was like, is there any way we can get these out of the shot so much, because all we see are these little like GoPro arms. And so I was like, I gotta find something that I can like put right up against the stand.
Yeah.
And so what I'm typically doing with those clamps is, specifically on the GoPros for like overheads on drums, is you have like where it bends, and I'll just put the clamp here and then angle the GoPro so it's going up towards the upper part of the overhead stand, so it's not in the shot and it's not obtrusive.
That's cool.
But they're cheap. They're $15-$20 and they're amazing. Small rig.
That's so cool, man. Anything else you want to talk about?
Man.
Off of, doesn't have to be worship related. It could just be, these are 2 books that I've just read that are, blowing my mind.
I do have that. I did want to plug the Discord real quick.
I forgot about that. Let's go.
Say this real quick. We have an online community for Elevation Worship Resources, and it's not like a fan club. It's like the goal was to make a community where anyone who loves worship, loves Jesus, can just come and ask questions and be a part of things. And we'll do like giveaways and whatnot in there. And it's turned into this really cool community with a bunch of people that I wish we could all hang out in person. That'd be really cool, but they're all over the world, so that would be pretty tricky. But anyone who wants to join, it's like, come on, let's hang out in there. It'd be fun. But the goal is to use Discord to help resource people one-on-one. And a lot of what's tricky with doing ministry, especially in an online world, is that it's like a lot of numbers. Like, oh, we've got this many people. It's like, but we can put a name to those numbers and talk to them. Like a few weeks ago, I just hopped in and 6 of us talked on audio chat about whatever for a few hours, and it was so cool getting to put a face to a name and a voice. And if anyone wants to join, please, we'd love to have you. As far as books I'm reading, I just started John Mark Comer's new book, and it's incredible. It's about discipleship, practicing the way, and it's taught me so much just about like what it really truly means to be an apprentice, a disciple of Jesus. And it talks a lot about how back in the Old Testament, you'd have all these people who, would learn the Torah from a super young age, all the first 5 books of the Bible. And then they would go on and learn the entire Old Testament. And then the best of them would be invited to apprentice under somebody,
right?
A rabbi. And the goal of being an apprentice under a rabbi would be to learn how he talks. He'd eat dinner with his family. He'd spend time with them. And it's really taught me a lot about how, if I'm going to become more like Jesus, the onus is on me, the responsibility is on me to really practice the way that he lived his life. And that book has been a really cool, practical handle for me on what that looks like. And as far as other things, marketing is such like a businessy word, but I like to think of it as just like, if you love something, how can you tell more people about it?
Right.
And there's a really cool book that a few of us on the team got. Of course, I'm blanking right now. It's oh my gosh, it's a thousand things I learned in product design school. And it's this guy. It's a series, but it talks all about if you're developing a product, if you're trying to get people on board with it. And it talks like, well, my favorite one in that, it talks about the concept of like flipping pancakes. The best way to get better at flipping pancakes is by making pancakes.
Yeah.
So I've started to look at it as like, well, you know, there have been so many times at work where my supervisor, Cole, he's amazing. He's a mentor, a friend, but he's so wise. And he came to me one day and he goes, "Hey man, I've noticed that we haven't put a video out in a while. Like, any way I can help you? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "I have just so many ideas and they're all so big." And he goes, "Well, let's take a step back. What can you do with an iPhone?" And he points over and John Sal was sitting at his desk and he goes, "Just go ask him a question." So I walked over with my iPhone and I said, "Hey, John Sal, what advice would you give a young worship leader?" And he did it in one take and we posted it, and it was iPhone and it was great. And I learned through that the thing that was holding me back was that I was just trying to make everything perfect.
Yeah.
And this concept of flipping pancakes is just like, now it's like a mantra that we always were talking about of like, all right, cool. Like, I don't know what's going to work, so let's just try stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn what people resonate with. I'm going to learn what they like, what they need by making videos. And then they might leave a comment and say, "Hey, can we do this?" Sure, let's try it. But yeah, I learned that in 1,000 things I learned in product design school.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well,
It's fun, man.
We'll link those. And by the way, I make pancakes almost every Saturday.
I saw that. That was incredible. It was inspiring.
Yeah, being a dad. But Tim, how can we track with you on socials?
Yeah. So at Elevation Worship on Instagram, Elevation Worship on Twitter, and we're so excited about this new project. I hope everybody loves it. I think these songs are going to, having sat with them and, you know, making the resources and charts for them and just listening to them, there have been so many times I've just started like weeping, and they're incredible. And I really see Jesus in them. And so, when that project comes out, I'm so excited for everyone to hear these songs. They mean a lot to me and our church. I know they will for you, but, Elevation Worship Resources on Discord, we'll put that link in there as well.
Yeah.
But I can't say enough, man. It feels really cool to be running parallel to what Worship Drummer's doing, and you have really paved the way, and we are all so grateful, John, for what you guys are doing, and inspired by everything you're doing. So doing the same thing at the same speed in the same direction, and it's inspiring, man. I love it.
Amen. Likewise. Thanks so much, Tim, for your time.
Yes, sir.